Shubhankar, can you hear me?
Hello. Mm. Okay. Good afternoon, all. Just quickly share the screen. Okay. Okay. Uh, Good afternoon, all. Welcome to Machine Learning for Materials Science. So, what we have covered till now. Um, so AI, then machine learning. We covered 5 good algorithms for doing supervised learning. They might not be super best, but they serve as foundation for other models as well. And we will cover some of the advanced models in some time, probably next week. Uh, and we also covered the gradient descent algorithm, which is also very useful to find out all the parameters of the model. And then we went on to look at some one of the branches or the verticals under unsupervised learning. So we covered clustering, and specifically we looked at the k-means and the db-scan and hdb-scan for clustering algorithms. Then we spent some days looking at what are the data sets available for materials, and um, what do you mean by features in materials science, and similarly labels. And so Professor Sen has been taking those classes. I hope those are useful for your project. And Just an update, we have received only 6 students' work. Remaining students, those who have created, please submit. Otherwise, 70% of the marks depends on your project submission. So at least those who have taken credits. Fine. So now that we have understood, for example, till now, so given x is the input, let's say, which has features, and y, we can do supervised learning to map x with y. And if y is not given, then one of the things that we can do is clustering. And the other remaining thing that can be done is dimensional reduction. Yes. So the idea behind this is we have high dimensional data everywhere. And all our current algorithms that we have, they all like current data set that we have, they are all high dimensional. Give me like one moment. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah. Mm, yeah. So any model algorithms that we have currently, like let's say machine like neural networks, random forest, and XGBoost, we have not covered any of them yet. But hopefully one of them few in the next week and few rest. So all of them are like they perform really well in high dimension. So not an issue immediately. And because data is high dimensional, GPUs actually showed their like potential. Yes, if the data was not that high dimensional, probably CPUs would have been okay, but GPU computing basically made this approaches way feasible. Yeah? And with this, the point is dimensional reduction basically has lost some ground. And when I talk about dimensional reduction, it's specifically if you have a lot of features, let's say your X is there and it has, let's say, 100 dimension or 200 or 1000 or even a million dimension. of features. The goal is to reduce the number of dimensions. Yes. Uh, so why do we need it then? So if the modern ML algorithms can already handle, GPUs can also make this happen, and probably we don't need it anymore. So the goal is visualizing this data is super hard in any other dimension more than three, let's say, for us. Even thinking about that in higher dimensions is even hard. Yes. So if we want to visualize anything, any data in, so we have to do dimension reduction, potentially to three dimensions or two, so that we can visualize nicely. Other thing is basically if we have lesser dimensions, then interpreting is very easy. So if we have, let's say, 1,000 dimensions and we're asking the question on 1,000 dimensions, your answer will depend on, let's say, 900 dimensions out of them. So giving a very straightforward answer, let's say like somebody, let's say, denied credit card, they don't want you to talk about like for an hour telling, okay, your this is wrong, that is right, but this is wrong, but this is wrong, but this is wrong, right? So a very simple answer in number of features, like, okay, so we had your credit score was below 800, that's how you have got, you did not get the credit card approved, let's say. And that's why like credit score is a very nice dimensional reduction of all your financial data, let's say. Yeah. Um, so it's easier to explain if you have lower number of dimensions like credit score. Although that does not solve a lot of problems in actual, but at least the customer knows, okay, why it was rejected very immediately. Yeah. And it also helps in other, like finance is one of them examples, even healthcare and like other things. Like for example, in healthcare, I think there are a lot of tests currently which are not straightforward tests. I don't know if you've seen like recent blood reports. If you see the tests, some of them are direct tests, which probably don't reveal or they have a lot of information embedded. But there are now some like very complex tests, or I can tell they are the same parameters, but they combine a bunch of parameters in the blood test and make a single metric to judge. So that is also an example of a dimensional reduction where I can just tell, okay, because of this particular score, that's why we are either suspecting or you are free of the disease, right? So finance, healthcare, it's very useful if we have lower number of dimensions. And of course, another thing is like noise reduction. And this is specifically useful when you have a bunch of dimensions, let's say 1,000 dimensions, or let's say medical report, you have a bunch of tests, right? And if doctor has to look at everything, then probably it will take time. And additionally, if let's say one of the tests went bad, right? Your some particular value would have been higher, but now it's little, let's say lower by some mistake. It's a noise in the data, but it's some mistake, but that pops up. If we had probably taken an aggregate or a composite mixture of that all data, probably would have got only one score or a one value that would have helped. But if and all the data points or all the features are available and one of them or few of them are noisy, then our thought process might differ. Yeah. So that's the entire difference that dimension reduction can cause. Uh, so yeah, so this was the example. So data visualization, if you have to understand high dimensional data patterns and we want to explore data structure and relationships. So for example, if I ask you to find clusters in a 1,000 dimensional space, it will be difficult. Rather, if it is clustered in a two-dimensional space or a three-dimensional space, it's easier to verify. Yeah? And then interpretable, I told you how it's useful, and then data quality. Yes, so that hopefully dimension reduction will remove the unwanted noise. Yes. There are four main techniques basically. There are many more to do this one, but like four main that are there, and probably we'll touch upon all of them maybe. So one of them is like principal component analysis. I believe like most of you have already done this, but we'll just touch on this one. So this is a linear method. It finds the maximum like variance directions, and of course it's like super fast and super interpretable. Uh, and it's a very easy choice for linear dimensional reduction, and it's used widely, and generally anybody asks you if you have too many dimensions, just do PCA, probably we'll cover that. The next is Disney. I don't know if you have heard this one. This is more into ML paradigm. And then, uh, so PC is like linear. The rest of the models that or techniques that we will discuss are mostly non-linear. Yeah. What they do and all of the things that we will discuss belong on a particular core idea. I will talk about that. But you have this line is important that preserves local neighborhood structure. Yes. So that means if few points in a like a 1,000 dimensional space, we want to reduce it to 2 dimensional space. If few points are closer in 1,000 dimensional space, they have to be also close in the 2 dimensional space. That's all it says. It's like preserving local neighborhood structure. So whatever the locality was in the 1,000 dimensional space, it has to be the same in the low dimensional space. Uh, but because it does all this stuff, it is a little bit expensive in computation time. But it gives a very nice visualization. I will show you some, and you can immediately spot, okay, if there is a pattern to find out. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that also this particular dimension reduction does is as you visualize some things in the low dimensional space, if somebody asks you like, can we write a machine learning algorithm to do this, right? If there is a question in the beginning, like given a particular problem statement, can we like use ML to find something. So immediately, if we can visualize the data, we can tell, okay, so these particular data points are making some clusters and some pattern. Then once there is a cluster, we can probably draw a decision boundary that can classify the left cluster and the right cluster, and so on and so forth, right? So that's why also like clustering and dimensional reduction also helps. The next is UMAP, Uniform Manifold Approximation Projection. This also does something similar as Disney does, but the algorithms are a little bit different. And this is also again a nonlinear method, and this is faster than Disney. And then in also while protecting the local structure, like neighborhoods being closer to each other, this also tells the neighbor that the points that are not closer to each other or far away from each other, make sure that when we reduce dimension, they're also far away from each other. Yes. So it just does one more additional thing. And UMAP is very nice for visualization as well and pre-processing tool as well. So we can, if you have a very high dimensional data set, you can use UMAP to map it to a small dimension and then process. Yes. Uh, I will talk about the advantages later also. And the last thing that people use in some variation or form is autoencoder. Okay? Autoencoder basically is uses neural network. It learns complex nonlinear mappings, and I will cover it later. But think of this is like we want like an embedding or embedding. I cannot say like we want a very smaller version that can store the entire data so that I can reconstruct the data again. So that means if I had a let's say a point in a 1,000 dimensional space, let's say it is like 1,000 dimensional space, I somehow dimension reduce to let's say 2 dimensional space. I have to reduce in such a way that not only this data plus another function that I can have somewhere. So this function with this low dimensional space can give me back the original data. Yes. So that's how generally autoencoders work. There are many variations of it, and Professor Sen and like Saurav, his PhD student, like they have a paper also on this one, like how to use autoencoders to uh, uh, like one of the variations of autoencoder, how to use and map. Okay. So we'll start on principal component analysis. I'm just covering, I know most of you have done it, but we'll still cover. Uh, so the PC's core intuition is basically, give me a minute, sorry. If you let's say uh, consider like a two-dimensional data, okay, and then principal components of a vector are basically these are vectors. Principal components are vectors that define a new coordinate system in which the first axis, let's say, or the first component here, goes in the direction of the highest variance of the data. Yes. I'll just quickly show you the example here. So fine. So let's say on the left hand side, we have this data points, right? So variance meaning like where the data points vary a lot in value, right? So here if you see let's say x1 is on the y-axis, or the y part, let's say the vertical one is the x2 and the lower part is x1. These are individual features of the same data point, right? X1 and x2 together make the input data point x. So here we basically ask the question like on which direction does it show the highest variance, right? So if you look at x1, it shows some variance. Of course, there are some values. It vary. Every blue point has some values. Variance would be like the difference between. And then in x2 also it shows some variance. But x2, if you see, the variance only lies between, let's say, -1 to 1. All the values lie between -1 to 1. But if you look at x1, the values range from 2.5 to +2.5, right? So more variance is available in under x1. But we can also find another axis, let's say, which if you see in the second diagram, yeah, so there is one axis that looks like this. So this is the axis which shows the highest variance. Okay, so this is a little bit diagonal in nature, and then this one shows even higher than what x1 shows and one x2 shows. Yes, and of course if the variance was highest in a particular axis, the principal component will go fall back to the like x1 or x2, but here the principal component is another direction altogether. Then that is the first component. Sorry. Okay. And the second axis that we find will be orthogonal to the first. Yes. And it is supposed to have the second highest variance. And similarly, the third component will be orthogonal to the other two, and that will give you third highest variance. Yes. And then we keep on continuing to do all for all dimensions. Yes. We'll match the dimensions that were present in the original data set. So now what is the output? If we apply on PC, if we get a model, sorry, if we get data sets like this, we will again give you another sets of principal components that match the number of input dimensions, but these are ranked according to the variance they show. Yes. In this particular axis is the maximum variance, the next axis will be the next maximum variance, and then so on and so forth. Hmm? Uh, Fine. Okay. Um, so the goal is simple. So if our data was like 3 dimensional, the third axis would be orthogonal to both the first and the second axis, and then so on. Now, if we want to reduce the dimensionality of our data, yes. So what do? We identify principal components, PC1, PC2, yes, and then we project the data. So the next thing that we do is whatever the data that we had, instead of projecting the, because the currently the like the space is between like the entire space where it is data points are represented are x1 and x2. Now we have new principal components. Yes, so one is the direction is like this, the other direction is like this. So we have to map now the original data points into this new principal components. Yes, so now we have to project each data point in the x1 from the x1 x2 into the new pc1 and pc2. Yes, so now each data point will become a single coordinate in the PC1, and if we just stop at PC1, or it can like we can have a point in the PC2 as well. Yes. So now if we want to reduce the dimensions, the way to reduce dimensions, we drop principal components. Yes. One of the idea is here. So if we had two PC1, so the PC1 is this one, which has the highest variance, the PC2 is up. So if we drop the PC2, then we just project the data points into the PC1. Then this orange line that you see on the picture, those are the points that finally we get, and this covers the maximum variance, but the dimensions of the overall data, originally it was 2, x1, x2, now it is just PC1. Yeah. So that's how it's done. And fine. So what are the practical benefits? Of course, like we can reduce the number of choosing number of principal components is on us. We can keep as much as possible. Then we can discard. We can actually discard the components with low variance, right? Because they are not useful. Rather, they will add to the memory and compute. Yeah. Typically the first 2 or 3 components capture most of the variance, 70 to 90% of the variance. Remaining components contain mostly the noise. Yes. There's a typical pattern, need not be the same case in yours data. So you have to be a little bit more careful in that sense. Uh, okay. And how do you visualize? It's simple, right? So one, if we had 1,000 dimensional data, we just drop it into multiple principal components. And if you just want to look at in 2 dimension or 3 dimension, we just take PC1 and PC2 or PC1, PC2, PC3, and then we can do the visualization. Fine. And hopefully, and most generally, it retains the important patterns, but we will see where it becomes a little bit difficult also. Uh, so again, so here PC, I think most of you have done this, but like we basically find the directions of maximum variance. Principal components are basically eigenvector of the covariance matrix. PC1 captures the most variance, PC2 the second most. Total variance will be sum of all the eigenvalues. Yes, and we have the projection formula for the first k principal components. Yes, fine. Now we have testing. Testing is super useful for visualization. It's a very nice tool. I will show you some outputs as well. But the goal, as I told you, it tries to preserve the local neighborhoods. So if a point and approach is very similar, so we basically convert similarities to probabilities and then match distributions. Right? So what it does is basically, if I have, let's say, 1,000 points in 1,000 dimensions, what I do is we find the similarity between all the points, right? And then we basically drop all those similarities into like a, let's say, a normal distribution. If we drop in normal distribution, that will not be a testing, but if we drop it to a t distribution, that becomes a testing. And once we drop the similarities into a t distribution, the t distribution, then the difference in the similarity in t distribution and the projection to the axis becomes the new, but I will cover in slowly. So it's a two-step process. In original space, we define the probability that the points are neighbors, right? So similarities become probabilities. More similar, they are neighbors. So so we have a probability that says the points are neighbors. And because it's a reduced space, because we have dropped into probability distributions, yes. The goal is points close in high dimensions remain close in low dimension, retains the local structure. Primary use case, visualization and cluster structure. We will see how it helps. So the way we do it is this way. So we define, I hope here, so we define the probability that the points are neighbors. So this is the probability that we define how neighbory a point is. And if you look at this, this looks like one Gaussian on top, one Gaussian on the bottom. Yes. And if you look at the similarity here is a Euclidean distance between xi minus xj square. Yes. And we can have a symmetric version of it as well. And how do we reduce space? Of course, like if we drop it to a t distribution and take only that drop and projection, then. And there is a nice maths involved, like why should we pick t distribution, not uniform distribution? And generally, the layman's drop is basically in uniform distribution, the tails basically is smoothed down, and the t distribution it stays up longer. Yes, because it immediately in uniform distribution, it's a Gaussian, it goes to zero, like goes down to zero, but in t distribution it stays up. Yes, let's say it does not reach zero. That allows even far away points, let's say the points that are very far away, not to have value zero. Yes, so it has some value. So if a particular point is far away from many points, eventually that point will have zero if it is a uniform distribution, because on the like tail end. But in t distribution, it will have some value. That some value added over multiple points, it will give it some value so that it is not lost and it's just not zero. Otherwise, what will happen? There'll be many points with just zero. So that's why t distribution just helps that, okay, so maybe it is far, but it has some value. That helps in addition and aggregation. It will not end up being zero. And now that we have probabilities, there is a nice distance. So because I remember like in Euclid, like if it is just points or discrete values in Euclidean space, we can do this xi minus xj square. But if it is probabilities, like probability distributions, there are many other metrics also. One of those metrics is like for like formula to find out difference between two probabilities is scale divergence. Wasserstein distance or optimal transport, if anybody has heard, those are other distances that we use. And so the goal is to make sure that whatever distribution we found it after transport, like sorry, after projection into the probabilities, that remains the same. Yes, we try to make it as close as possible. Hmm. So now, and we can solve this with gradient descent as well. So I told you, like, very nice algorithm, works every time. And intuition is very simple. So basically, if the points are closer, the value is higher, and the points are far away, the value will be small. And if the value is small, if we calculate the uh, difference or division, Kale divergence finds. If they're closer to each other, Kale divergence will say, okay, this distributions are matching. Otherwise, it's far away, and that's how it tries to bring two distributions closer. Yes. And what are the key properties of testing? So one is basically it helps easier to visualize, and it does nonlinear mapping, uh, and then also it preserves locally. The only difference here is like Disney is a little bit expensive. It's order of n square. Order of n square, I think you can guess from where it is coming. We have to calculate Euclidean distance over all points. Uh, so it becomes very slow. So if you have 1,000 points in 1,000 dimensions, dimensions will be later part of array, but 1,000 we have to calculate distance between all the points. Non-deterministic. So here different runs can produce different results. Parameter sensitivity. So we have some parameters to choose for it that can affect results. And global structure, there is a loss because it does not try to, how do I say, preserve the global structure. Yes. So because anything that is far away, if you look at the point similarity being dropped onto a Gaussian, anything that far away gets like this small value, right? Uh, if you have seen like a T distribution, something that is far away 1,000 and something that is far away 100, the difference between them will be very small. Yes. So that's how the global structure is lost. Nearby, because they have high values, they get retained. Fine. And this is generally used for data visualization, not pre-processing. Earlier it was used, but not anymore. So we have something better. We call it UMAP. Yes. And it's a nonlinear approach again, and it preserves both local and global structure. Yes. And this is also like similar in nature, but we'll go ahead. Give me one moment. Sorry. Yeah. And and like how do I say, like the goal was the same. So preserving local neighborhoods again in the reduced space, and motivation behind this is like PC only captures linear, but this one sometimes real data can have nonlinear structures. So local similarity is important, but also global structure also matters. Yes, that's why UMAP came into being. And how does it do? The same thing. It defines a similarity metric in original space. It defines another similarity metric in reduced space. It just says that if both are similar, if the 2 points are similar in the original space, they have to be similar in the low dimensional space. Yes, that's it. So that means if, how do I say, if the similarity was 80% in the original 1,000 dimensional space, if you reduce it to 2 dimensional space, the similarity should be also again 80%. Yeah, that's what it says. But of course, it might not be always feasible to make it 80%, but as close to 80%. So here is the goal. So here again, so you can, for visualization purpose, we can use anything beyond Euclidean distance as well. But here distance is just given as a function. So it can be Euclidean distance. You can use anything as well. Yes. And because distance is used, I think you can understand the same principle as Disney. Yeah. And here we have something called an individual similarity, and there is something called a like combined similarity metric. So individual similarity is defined by this particular similarity metric, which is again exponential of the, again you find Euclidean distance minus like a distance closest to the neighbor, and then dividing by distance closest distance to the kth closest neighbor. So this particular, it can be shown that this particular metric, it ranges from 0 to 1 and is also symmetric. That means if you find from xi to xj, and if it is xj to xi, then it's basically symmetric. Both are basically same. So now if, let's say, if w is there, if it is, now w is the definition of similarity between two examples in the original high dimensional space, and let now there be like a w, we want to find, let's say, another region, let's say lower dimensional space. So okay, so we have in high dimensional space, we have this similarity. In low dimension also, we use this equation to find similarity. Now what we do, now we can use any loss function, or let me see, sorry. Yeah, so we define this similarity metric. We find the similarity between 2 points in the original space, let's say. We find the reduced similarity in the low dimensional space. Then we can use something called a cross entropy loss. We will discuss on the loss function a little bit more also in the later classes. But this particular cross entropy loss is very similar to the one that we had. I hope you remember the one in the logistic regression. Yes, the maximum likelihood function. Yes, so if you look at this, this is basically the log likelihood function. W xi and xj plus log of this by this, let's say, and 1 minus of this plus log of 1 minus of this, right? It's very similar to that function, and both of them actually, likelihood and cross entropy, are like, they are same basically. So what we can do is we can find cross entropy loss between the original similarity and the reduced space similarity. Yes, and the goal is to like minimize this cross entropy loss. I hope you remember, if the classification is 1 and the prediction is 1, then it is 1, otherwise it is other way around. Yes, so the that becomes this. So our goal is to use like gradient descent to minimize this. Yes, and there also we minimized log likelihood and like negative log likelihood. Here we are trying to minimize the cross entropy loss. So the next is like, what is the advantage of doing this? Of course, like this is advantage is basically, this is nonlinear mapping. It captures complex data structure. It preserves local relationship. It preserves global structure as well. If you can see here, yes, sorry. And then it is also super fast than Disney, and it is reproducible because every time you run this, it almost gives the same answer. Properties similarity lies between 0 and 1. The metric that we found out, or the similarity measure that we found out, it's basically symmetric, so that you can treat it as a distance, and then similarities are treated as probability distributions. Yes. So now if we compare across PCA, Disney and UMAP, again, PCA linear, just find the principal components and then project to principal components. Yeah, Disney finds again similarity but drops into like a T distribution. Yes. The only problem here is, the if you look at anything that is very far away, that does not get a good value. Rather, like the which is super far away and just far away have similar values, so global structure is not preserved. And UMAP, it's still on distance only, and finds the distance to closest neighbor and kth closest neighbor. So it does some kind of normalization to the entire distance, but still distance is taken into account. So because distance is taken into account, global structure is also preserved. That means the 2 points that are very far away remain far. And the more the farther they are, this particular distance value keeps it in stock. So what we do, so there is one nice data set I think all of you will eventually do a try. So we have this MNIST. What is MNIST basically? MNIST is 70,000 samples of data sets, sorry, data points, where each is like a picture of like 28 cross 28 pixels. And basically people have written in hands the numbers like 1, 2, 3 till 0 to 9. Yes, just the numbers are written in handwritten format. The goal is to predict, and one particular picture has one digit. The goal is to predict which digit is that. Yes, and generally all the models also do fairly well on this data set. We have solved MNIST to say. Yeah? Uh, but again, it's just a 28 cross 28 image. Yes. So if we did not have, let's say, classes into it, and let's say it's not supervision, I told you like the beginning, the goal is, can machine learning solve it, right? So to answer the question, can machine learning solve it? I need to understand that somehow if everything that is written in 10 or everything that is written 9-digit pictures and 8-digit pictures and 3-digit pictures, are they actually separate data points in the original space, right? So if all the 9 digits are first of all separate from all the 8 and all the 9 are somehow closer to other 9s, then I can think of there can be a decision boundary or a hyperplane in SVM, let's say, or any other decision tree or logistic regression. There can be a hyperplane that can cut that entire space of 1000 dimensions, let's say. Yeah. Here the number of dimensions is 28 cross 28. Yes, but let's say 764 probably. So 764 dimensions. And if all the nines were somewhere together and some eights were all together, ones were somewhere else, all this somewhere else, then I could have multiple hyperplanes that could be cutting the space, or I could have a nonlinear like decision boundary as well. So initial part is, can machine learning solve this problem, right? So then I have to tell basically, if the distribution of the entire data points along with the numbers, if there is some gap between them and the similar things are closer to each other. So that is my first question. I'll like, before even attempting that machine learning can solve, we can use this. So we can first try to visualize how they look in the high dimensional space. But high dimensional space is not possible. So what we do is we come back to low dimensional space where we can visualize, and then our tools come into picture. Testing is there, UMAP is there, PC is there, and autoencoder is also there. So PC is again super fast, UMAP will be medium speed, testing will be slow, and if it is like a huge data set, don't use it. Yes. Don't use it comes with a star mark, like conditions apply. There are fewer methods that do Disney also a little bit faster. A lot of people have worked on it also, but UMAP is also faster. So this is how it looks. Yeah? So assume every color that we have is basically one digit. Yeah. And if you look at the PCA, like let's say if red was, I don't know what the color difference, but like red, let's say multiple types of blue, violets, and orange, and yellow, and all these are there. PC, you see, like the data itself was very nonlinear. Like if you write number 5 and write number 6 and all this for, the distribution in the space was super nonlinear, let's say, and then bringing it to two-dimensional, PCA will only can do linear. So if we do it, drop it to only two principal components, this is how it looks. There is some resemblance of data points appearing together and similar, but if you see, there is also a lot of overlap here. So like telling that probably a machine learning, if somebody gave me this PCA plot and to ask me like, can machine learning solve it, I'd have said, if PCA was the only thing I knew, I would say it's a very difficult problem to achieve. Yes. But at least I understand there cannot be any linear algorithm that can solve this problem, because PCA itself is not able to identify into multiple blobs, let's say. Yeah. So then let's say we move to UMAP. UMAP is like a lot more nonlinear projections into low dimensions. So here, if you see, like very nice, right? Very nice plots, and like individual numbers, if you see, there are 10, yeah, there are 10 blobs starting from 0 to 9, which is which, not important right now. But if I drop the entire 28 cross 28 dimensions into just two dimensions, UMAP is still able to tell that there are some data points that are closer and they're definitely far away from other data points. Yes. So now I understand, okay, I can also map this, okay, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So, but at least I understand that somehow there exists a pattern in high dimensional, also in low dimension. Now, but UMAP is a nonlinear, but at least a machine learning algorithm can exist, which can probably find out, if you give me a new data point, I can probably write a classifier or a regressor which can tell me which digit this is. Yes. And of course, that algorithm has to be nonlinear because UMAP is nonlinear and PCA was not able to find out, but UMAP is able to find out. Yeah. The next comes autoencoder. I told you autoencoder based on neural network and all the things. It's definitely useful for a little bit more complex data set. But anything neural network and forward, the major problem is finding the right W and B for a neural network is very, very difficult. So here is one autoencoder, let's say, it's able to separate. I can still see some patterns away, but there might be some digits which are like overlapping. Yes. So that means few of the digits have like very clear boundary. I'll maybe make a few mistakes here and there. But there are some that have like overlapping. You can also see the same happening in the UMAP. I am not sure. You can see some blue points appearing on the top of this middle yellow. There are some violet points going to this green and going to this other yellow on the top left. Yeah. So those are happening. Those noises will be there. And similarly, autoencoder also finds the same principle. But autoencode did not perform as well as UMAP, and it can happen, right? So it depends on the size of autoencoder, what kind of autoencoder, what it did it actually, were we able to train it or not, and maybe autoencoder is just too good and probably does not care about MNIST. Yeah. So that can also happen. So choosing the right algorithm also matters here, and as you can see, most of them are like related to the distance. Like they try to preserve the distance. PCA tries to preserve like the variance as much as variance in the first ranking axis. Your Disney and UMAP, they try to preserve as much as similarity from high dimension to low dimension. Autoencoder tries to do, will touch upon that, if the information is enough to reconstruct it back, right? So if I reduce it to 2 dimensions, I should be able to reconstruct my original dimension easily. That's how autoencoder is. Fine. Okay. So now, like, what do we choose? PCA, when we require super fast and simple solution, data has a linear structure most likely, and interpretable components. Interpretable components here are important because anything that is linear regression is way easy to define rather than probably like a non-linear SVM. We'll talk more about interpretable as in common. So interpretable basically says that what components of your algorithm were responsible for this particular decision. So if I predicted, let's say if I classified something into red or blue, you can basically come back to the model. You tell me exactly what components got activated so that you got this decision. Yeah, so that is interpretable. If everything is linear, it's easier to say what components got activated. Yeah. So if things are non-linear, we have to calculate a bunch of stuff, and sometimes it's just too complex to go back and calculate. Yeah. And along with interpretableness, there is another one that is used called explainable. So there's a tiny difference. Explainable basically tells what parts of input. Yeah, so there is data, there is model, and there is output. What parts of model were responsible for this output was interpretability. What parts of the input were responsible for getting this output is explainability. Yes, tiny difference. People sometimes you will see both are interchanged, but this is the most common, like how to standard definition I have landed on, and that's used widely also. So PCA also like super useful, then interpretable and super useful. Then we can prepare data for other algorithms as well, because sometimes even thousand, if for example, let's say you want to use Disney, but Disney is too slow. What you can initially do is first do PCA, but you don't do PCA to very low dimensions, 2 dimensions. And I think we recently saw a paper that did that. So if you have, let's say, 5,000 features, you can do first to PCA to 1,000 features, and then you can use Disney to come to, let's say, 2 dimensions. Fine. So generally PCA is used as a first algorithm to reduce dimension to some point, not the lowest point that you want to visualize at. So not a lot of information is lost in, let's say, the nonlinear interaction information. So at least 5,000, 2,000 if you want to come, like this 5,000 are just number basis, you can have as many. So 5,000 to 1,000, that can be PCA. 1,000 to others, this can be Disney, UMAP, or something else, autoencoder also. So now when to use Disney? Primary goal is visualization. If you just want to see, data set has to be a little bit small because it runs an order n square, so becomes expensive. And we just want to look at the cluster structure, right? And reproducible results, because I told you it's not deterministic. So does not always give you the exact answer. So probably you have to try it multiple times to get something. And when to use UMAP? Of course, like both quality and both speed. It works really nicely for large data sets. It's like there are GPU versions for it also. And one, to reduce the data for modeling. And it's we can also like have reproducible results. Yeah. The next thing is what we have is autoencoders. I told you, like even if autoencoder was like at the last I put, it's a very nice algorithm, but uh, good thing is it can run on GPUs by default. So, but the point is it needs like you should use it only when it's like super complex data set. Yeah. And I told you again, reconstruction capability. So once you reduce it to 2 dimensions, do you want to go back to the original data point? If you want that kind of flexibility, then autoencoders are very useful. Yeah. And I think you will see a lot of papers, in at least in material sciences, definitely using them. Yeah. These are all more guidelines, basically, scaling features, different units affect distant metrics. Like I told you the same thing, like the cricketer's age and salary difference, the same thing affects everywhere. So make sure you scale them. Outliers matter because it's based on a similarity metric. Sometimes can distort projections, specifically PCA. If there's a very large outlier somewhere there, PCA will see that is the maximum variance and it will just plot it there. So noisy like points will produce bad projections in all. It's not only PCA, but PCA will be targeted first. And please consider feature selection. This is where like probably like all this course, like this entire course will probably take you there. Like how even without running machine learning algorithms, can we select features which we understand by our domain knowledge, which will be actually useful. Because data set can be just a too much also. I think Professor Sen was telling that like how do I say, 5 years earlier, let's say, or 10 years earlier, there was no such data set. Now there are just way too many. Okay, maybe not way too many, but actually way too many. But then selecting everything, like because I have just way too many data sets, it doesn't mean I just learn on everything. Use some domain knowledge so that it can be reduced to a point where it can be actually useful. Otherwise, you will be just wasting compute time, and those additional data points will become noise. Yes, and the noise affects even dimensional reduction. It tries to reduce some, but the next is like parameter tuning and PCA. Number of components is one of the things that you want to do. Disney is perplexity and running rate for finding out. UMAP is again tuning the number of neighbors. If you remember sigma and then rho, the closest kth distance, the kth closest point, and that is k will be a hyperparameter here. And then how do you validate? You validate on the downstream task. We'll talk about downstream task in some time maybe. Visualization, that's what we do. I told you, like, do clusters make domain sense? Like in the number clusters here, we could easily, if I had marked here which is one, which is two, which is three, but generally this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we can easily verify. Okay, so do the clusters make sense or not? Are the known relationship preserved? Like for example, 8 is closer to, let's say, writing 5, right? So the 5 has to be closer to 8. 1 has to be closer to, let's say, 7. But this does not look similar in actual value, but they are closer in the terms of number of pixels they will occupy and how you write them, right? So 1 has to be closer to 7 rather than 1 being closer to 9 than 7, or let's say 8, 2, and 7. Yeah? So those are relationships that you want to preserve. And for material science, similar questions. Can you explain the structure that you got? For model building, of course, you can cross-validate with downstream model. Downstream is basically, so any unsupervised algorithm will not give you any answers, right? So initially we did clustering. This one is down dimensional reduction. This does not give you an answer. Like dimension reduction just gives you in smaller dimensions how to capture most information. Clustering will just cluster without any labels, right? Downstream task is the actual prediction that you want to make, right? So if, for example, if we did the clustering and then we did the, let's say we reduced it to lower dimension and then we ran a classifier on top of it, is it still able to predict it correctly? That will decide, is PCA good or UMAP good or autoencoder good or Tisney good. Okay. So after reducing dimensions into two dimensions from 1000, is our classifier model, which could be logistic regression, decision tree, or like let's say SVM, are they able to classify correctly on those two dimensions? If we are doing good, then only like our dimension reduction thing has worked properly. That's why that is like a downstream task or downstream model. Once you have like upstream task would be like dimension reduction, downstream model will actually do the classification. Okay. So cross validate, we validate with the downstream task that this has actually worked better or not, the reduction features. So we can compare performance with versus original features, of course. That means we can compare with the original 1000 dimensions versus two dimensions, and then we run the other like classification algorithms and check how far are we. Interpretability is another thing, right? Because once we drop into two dimensions, we can answer question. I told you credit score. There is a like a diabetic also. There is a like a month-wise diabetic score now comes instead of sugar. So those are things. And next. These are the few things. More dimension is always better. Dimension reduction, I told that nowadays we don't need dimension reduction, but not all of us have good GPUs for us access. Even if you think for example, if you look at papers, research papers, they will say, okay, we have used this, we have run in this GPU, but if you look at those GPU, that might have like a 80 GB of memory, right? So it's too high. Matlab, not everybody has access to an 80 GB GPU, let's say, VRAM. Yeah? Reducing dimensions will always be handy so that you can run locally and you can run fast. The more the dimensions, more the multiplications, more the finding Euclidean distance, more the similarity distance finding out. All these take time, right? So dimension reduction is helpful, very helpful there. Even if you have GPU, it is helpful. And most of the times we might not even have GPUs to do that. Yes. So more dimensions always better. That's might not be true always. Noise dimensions hurt performance. I told you like that if there are too many noise in the data points, it's not helpful. Linear methods are obsolete. PCA actually, I told you, does not work in like MNest is still like a non-linear data point. That's why it does not. But PCA generally works really nice. Yes. So we can try PCA in the beginning, and I told you use PCA in the beginning, like 5,000 to 1,000, use PCA, and then you can use something else. Yeah, so PCA is very fine algorithm. Please use it. It's super fast. And visualization is same as analysis. Not true. Even if it comes visualization, can it classify again better? That's not possible. We have to look at the downstream task or downstream model to answer this question. Yes. So dimension reduction, when do we need it? Finally, so data visualization, interpretable model requirements, and noise reduction. Yes. And also I will add to reduce the compute and time. Yes. Whenever we are testing, we'd rather do it in under less dimensions. We understood PCA, Disney, and UMAP, autoencoder sometime later. Uh, Please practice as much as you see. I think most of you have selected one of the projects, at least 6 students. Please go ahead and do PC and UMAP at least. Disney, if take time, ignore PC and UMAP can be done. Please do. Yes. And yes, I think that's the major thing I have for the slides. Let me just show you one or two figures on the notebook. Yeah. Okay. This is again a notebook. I will share also. The only thing here you have to learn is like PCA is there in sklearn. Disney is also there in sklearn. PCA will be under decomposition. Disney will be under manifold. Uh, but UMAP comes from another package called UMAP Learn. So, like you have to install this one, UMAP Learn. Fine. So once you are, I don't know if try, let's say, so if you are here, let's say you, and then I hope you all remember this Conda Activate MLMS test. We'll try to have more sessions. I think Professor Sen has already told more of interactive sessions where you can ask questions like this. So here, if you look at this, you have to do a pip install umap learn, right? So because this is not there in the sklearn, like the scikit-learn, it is not there. So you have to install this additionally. Hmm. And then you enter, it will install a bunch of packages, but it will do it. So now libraries are done. We have, I will take you straight up to something else maybe. Yeah. So, like this is one of the original feature, let's say in 2 dimensions. If you see on the right hand side, I think this we have seen the blobs 1, 2, 3. If we reduce it to principal components, like first principal component and second principal component, if we like do the projections to the new principal components, this is how it looks like. Of course, information is lost in some because it looks at variance, but maybe these two clusters are the same. Yeah. Sometimes PCA might not be also super helpful. Uh, and if you see, like this was the variance, right? So in the PC1, like the principal component one, we had almost 90% of the variance. So that is how it's chosen. And the PC2 has been chosen because orthogonal to it and has the second highest variance. Yes. And what we do is basically it was already in the x1 and x2 space. We move it to like another coordinate system of PC1 and PC2. Yeah. That's what is happening. Yes. So the axis has changed from x1 to x2 now to PC1 and PC2. And if we just want to keep PC1, then everything we just project to PC1. And then if you see on the right hand side, all we have is just the same data points in the original, but they're projected to only PC1. So we get from 2 dimensional to 1 dimension, preserving as much variance as possible. Fine. Then UMAP, all these points are there. Like here, if you run UMAP on top of it, it's very non-linear, of course. Like as in it's a 3 dimensional, but if you project into 2 dimensional using UMAP, uh, like if you just project it here, then some of the loss is there. If you see, if I project to one direction, then some distance that the yellow was actually far away in Z, that is lost. This one was originally in 3 dimensional space. If we project it to 2 dimensional space, basically we are removing, let's say, y-axis, or sorry, here in the middle we remove the z. If you just drop z, then it becomes this flat spiral. Like if you look at from top, then the problem is we lost the distance value. And if we again remove this from another axis, let's say y-axis, some structure is visible, but still the distance is not clear. Yes, because this green is far away from this green rather than this green. So PCA results gives us this, which is not super useful, muddies everything because this is a nonlinear data point space. And if we do UMAP, this is how it preserves. Yes. So if you look at here, all the yellows are here, the closer points. Here also they are closer in the UMAP output. Yes. So this is UMAP dimension 1, UMAP dimension 2. This was left one was the original 3 dimensional space. If we map it to the UMAP dimensional reduction to 2 dimensional space, this is how the points are now projected. Yeah. There is similarity has been preserved. Yes. Of course, not exact because anyway, if you move from 3 dimensional to 2 dimensional, some information is lost. Yes, fine. And I was talking about MNIST. MNIST looks like this. This is a 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. This is, yeah, so these are the digits values. And then, okay. So this MNIST is 8 cross 8, so it is just 64 dimensions. And probably MNIST is 8 cross. My bad if I said 28 cross 28. Maybe it is 8 cross 8. I have a little bit doubt. And then if you do for MNIST, I showed you the other figure. This is one of the, if you have this data set, just going back, you have 70,000 of these kind of data sets. And the goal is to predict also, if I give you a new handwritten number, you have to tell me what. But here we don't want to do that. First, we want to observe if actually there can be a difference in the space, in the high dimensional space. But high dimensional we cannot observe, so we move to low dimension. So we use PCA. This is how it jumbles up. All the digits are here. It does not look nice. UMAP, you see, looks pretty nice. All the coloring points I mapped it to digits. They look very nice, separated far away from each other. Tisney also does that. Here, if you look at this, oh, I see. Fine. So if you see testing also does well, UMAP also does well. But UMAP, if you can think of, like for example, zero is very far away from others. And if you look at this, like closer, if you digits that are written very similar to each other will be similar to each other. And in Tisney, it preserves the local structure. That means things that are same, they will look similar. That's why they will preserve, but does not preserve the global structure. That means zero is actually very different looking from other places. That is what is being preserved in UMAP. Yes, I hope that is there. These are some other data points that I have put. I hope you try. These are all different parameters that we have chosen. And the number of neighbors, like the choosing of the kth closest neighbor, and then minimum distance. There was one like sigma is there, and the row was there. If you vary those, these are the outputs. Yeah. So finding those are very useful. Okay. So that's all I wanted to. Oh, we are running a little bit, but anyway, we started a little bit late. So yeah. So that is all I wanted to cover today. So we covered 5 basic algorithms of supervised learning. We covered unsupervised learning as well for the clustering, and today we covered for dimension reduction, PCA, Tisney, UMAP. There is also another thing called autoencoder. Autoencoder will come later, but at least PCA, Tisney, and UMAP. And given you have already selected your projects, I think the first step you can do is, can ML solve this particular problem? You can first see and visualize if there can be some patterns that you can visualize in your data set. Even if pattern does not come, that does not mean, how do I say, it does not mean machine learning cannot solve it, because we're anyways reducing it 2 dimensions. It's just that it gives you, like, how do I say, you become a little bit more happy. Okay, 2 dimensional space, I can see some clustering happening, because maybe in 4 dimensional space there can exist a cluster. Yes. Yeah, fine. Okay, and that's all. If any other questions are there, please drop. And if Professor Sen wants to say something. But major is, please submit your projects. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to repeat. Particularly those of you who want credit, you have to
Yeah.
complete the project that carries 70% of the weight. So you better. We had put 5th September as the deadline. It was extended to the 15th, but even till now, some of you have not completed it. So do it by this weekend. Don't worry. I mean, I have tried to give you some idea about what kind of things you can do with materials. We will learn more as we go along. So if you are worried that you don't have a clear idea what all you can do with materials, I have given you some idea. If you go through those slides, property prediction, classification, these broad ideas I have already given you. But of course, you can always refine your ideas, goals as you go along and as we go along in the course. You don't have to give the final goal right away.
And your problem statement can change completely also. That also we
Yes,
are
yes.
open.
But it has to, you have to show that it is evolving, that
Yes.
you learned something, so you are changing the goal and stuff.
Yes. Yes.
So that always happens in actual research, and therefore it's perfectly fine. But
Yes.
get started. And after the formal, and some of you, I mean, if you are worried that, when will we learn doing things on materials, it's important that we go through these formal discussions so that you have an understanding of what you are doing. This is something I have been repeating. And after that, of course, we will go through hands-on sessions. I would encourage you to sit with your laptops or computers or wherever you are working, so that you can do things as we go along, number one. After we do that, then we will discuss examples from literature. We may not be able to reproduce everything.
Uh, okay, can anybody else confirm if you can hear me not processing? Okay, so you can hear me. Okay, so processing. Yeah. He will be joining back soon. Yes. Yeah. So I think what he was trying to say is basically like whatever notebooks I have shared. Okay, so please try them, even if it is not relevant to material science immediately. But the idea is these are basically easy data sets. You don't have to think about materials while doing these data sets. So these data sets are very simple. They're created to have patterns, right? So these are specifically, I think you remember we created like classification and linear blobs, moon. They have been created so specifically because it's easier to observe the output as well. Visually, we can verify this is working or not, right? Same as that circular spiral one that we did today. Yeah. So because these are very simple to verify, then you can try some stuff like change some values, some hyperparameters, some this, try to observe. Yes. So please give it a try. And most of the algorithms that we have covered till now are like CPU based, so no need to worry. So it will run on your computers as well. You don't need very fast computers as well. They run in like seconds, not even seconds, under seconds. Uh, some might take more, but they run under seconds. So you at least you can do all that. And on the project, like please, like be free. Initially, you can think of an idea, but like keep us part of your journey so that we understand that you went landed up with a very different problem because there was an evolution, as processing was saying, because there was an evolution towards that. Okay. Give me like like 30 seconds. I'll give him a call if he wants to come back, maybe, or internet issue. Okay, it seems some internet issue is there. So please, we'll meet on Friday, 4:30. Fine. Okay. Thanks a lot. Yes. And if you have any questions, please drop. And those who are giving this particular exam, I have not talked about inductive bias for any of these. Yeah. My favorite question is asking about inductive biases. So whatever algorithms we have learned for unsupervised algorithms, both like clustering as well as this, those are giving credits, and otherwise also other people who are watching this video think on inductive bias of all these algorithms. Yes. The assumptions that algorithms makes irrespective of what the data set is, right? That's inductive bias. Fine. Okay. With that, I will see you on Friday, 4:30. Bye.